Hey guys,
Hey,
welcome back.
everyone.
Welcome back, Joel.
Welcome back, Matt.
Welcome back, Joel.
All right, so we're going to get into Philippians 2 today, guys. Again, Philippians 2, 12 through 18. And Matt wanted to start us off, so I don't want to steal his thunder. So
I wanted to read the very first part of the very first verse that we're talking about, and I wanted to read right here. It says, now this is big. Therefore,
therefore, and
therefore,
we've just come off this massive, huge, big section where Paul's talking about the obedience of Christ and how he became a servant. He humbled himself, became a man. He was a servant, and he became obedient to death on a cross. And because of that example that we have, now Paul is coming and talking about the things that we need to do, the obedience that we need to have. And so he goes into talking about, my dear friends, as you've always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling.
yeah. And so when I read that, continue in my absence. I kind of think about, pressing on, about continuing forward. Paul's not with them right now, and
And let me
maybe
pause you
they're
right there for a second. When your leader's not there, I think it is so much easier to just slack off, or to not be as strong as you were, to not be as committed as you were, because hey, your leader's not there. And it's like they're not getting the guidance and leadership that they once were, and so it could have been a lot harder on them. But Paul really does have this charge for them.
So he's like, you've always been obedient before, but even more so right now. You need to step it up when I'm not in your presence. And you're right. It's easier when they're leaders. You're following a leader, but when you have to do it on your own, it's a lot tougher. And I kind of look at this whole dig in thing as a way to grow in our faith like that. To do it on your own every single day.
And I think the reality is, if you look at verse 13, Paul says, "For it's God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose." So it's like Paul's like, "I'm not with you, but you know who is? God.
Yeah.
God is with you at all times." And the reality is, especially for you students, like you need to take this and own this on your own. You may not be meeting with your youth pastor, your youth leaders, your youth group, your church, but you need to own this on your own. God is with you. God is working in you. And you need to know how to have a relationship with Him that is personally yours, not your parents, not your youth leaders, not your friends, but your faith and your relationship with Him. So you need to know how to study God's word. You need to know how to give cheerfully of your tithes and offerings. You need to know how to find a solid church, to serve without being prompted. All those things. You need to do that personally, and which it's just so important, because once you graduate, you're not going to be under your parents, you're not going to be under your youth leaders, you're not going to be under anyone else. It's going to be yours to do. And if you don't have this relationship with God on your own, the chances of you having a vibrant and a strong faith beyond high school are pretty slim. At least that's what the numbers would say, of all the studies that have been done.
Yeah. As I read through this, I kind of think, I feel like I read this and I see kind of Paul feeling proud of them a little bit, but he also wants to like push them on forward and to step it up. And, one of the things that really stands out, it says, this is kind of a verse my parents used to have me learn, because it says 14, do everything without complaining or arguing. Some versions say murmuring or disputing or different things, but basically, keep doing these things without complaining. And I think a lot of times I see things posted on Facebook or memes go around of like complaining about being stuck at home, or complaining about different things like the government or whatever it may be.
Made.
What was that?
Decisions being made.
Yeah.
Rulings.
The Red Sox aren't playing, or that they are and they're losing, whatever.
Politic complaints.
But we need to do things with the right attitude. You know what I mean? Like, we need to do things with the right attitude. It's not enough to just do good things. It's more so that we need to do good things, but have a good attitude about why we do it.
Yeah, because God is not looking at what we're doing as much as he's looking at what's in our hearts. Jesus talks about out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what comes out of our mouth is what's already in our hearts. And the reality is we need to know why we're doing this. Why is Paul nailing, don't complain, don't grumble, don't argue? He's doing this because he wants the Philippians to, we're going back, live a life worthy of the gospel, he says in chapter 1. That's his whole goal. He wants us to live a life worthy of the gospel, that is sharing and shining the gospel to everyone around us. So he says, do all these things, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky. So if we want to shine bright for Christ, we have to become blameless and pure. And we can't do that without Christ. So we need to have Christ working in us. He's talked about that. We need to continue on with what we know. We need to continue on with our relationship with Christ and have that same attitude and that same mindset as he has. So, and when we do that, we're not going to be grumbling as much. We're not going to be complaining as much. We're not going to be arguing. And people are going to see that. People are going to see that we're different than the rest of the world. Because if we argue and we complain and we grumble, basically, even though if we're doing the right things, we're telling the world that, what, God really doesn't care about what we're doing. God's not really bringing us good. God's not working these things for our good. God just isn't the person that we actually say he is by our other words. But when we're complaining and grumbling, like, God just isn't worth it.
Yeah.
God isn't enough. God can't really satisfy me. And I'm not content with what he's given me.
Yeah.
And the world sees that. And so if we want to shine like stars in the sky, we have to do away with grumbling, complaining, and arguing, and that's hard because I think that's part of human nature.
Yeah,
our flesh.
And I think I was just thinking about that verse, "Shine like stars in the universe," and think specifically about the Philippians and how they were living in a town where they weren't really well liked. It was a town with a lot of Roman nationalists, and the Christians were following Christ.
Hail Caesar!
Yeah, and the Christians were calling Christ their king, and that didn't really go over very well with these nationalists, a lot of retired soldiers and stuff like that. And, we have to act in a way that we are blameless in front of other people, even when when those people are not treating us well.
And Paul talks about how we do that. He said, then you'll shine like among them, like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And the word of life, that's the gospel, the life-giving gospel. So if we want people to see that we have real life that comes from Christ, we need to hold on to God's word and live that out. And if you go back to John, John 1, the word was with God, the word was God, and that's talking about Jesus. So the more that we hold on to Jesus and what he says, the more we're going to be doing these things.
Yeah. And Jesus, he, one of the big things he taught was that we act with love. So, even 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, it talks about if we do all these different things, even if they're good, but don't have love, they have no matter. They don't mean anything. Yeah. They have no purpose, because we're doing from selfish, back to what we read last week. We did them for selfish reasons, do nothing out of selfish reasons. So why don't you close us out, Joel?
Yeah, I was just looking at verses 17 and 18, and one of the big things that Paul talks about is he's like, if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I'm glad and I rejoice with all of you, and you should be glad and rejoice with me too. A drink offering was usually a little bit of wine that was poured out, really showing their service and dedication to God. And I think about, Paul's using that example, like I'm being poured out like this drink offering, and he's being poured out in service and sacrifice to God and to the Philippians and helping them and serving them. But I was just thinking about, in this world, we pour ourselves out for so many things, whether it's sports or dance or music or relationships. I mean, how often do we spend so much time, as guys pursuing girls or girls pursuing guys? We do all these things, hobbies, and we pour ourselves in these things, and there's sacrifice involved, and we're happy to do that. But when it comes to the things of God, when it comes to serving, and it comes to being at church and worshiping and fellowshipping and youth group, like those are some of the first things to go in our life, so we can pour ourselves into other things. But Paul's saying, look, we need to be glad and we need to rejoice that we have this opportunity to serve God and to serve each other. And, you know, I encourage each of us to take a look at our lives. What are we pouring our lives into? Are we pouring our lives into what's important to God, or are we pouring our lives into what's important to this world?
Yeah.
You know, only one of these things is going to last in the end, and only one of the things is going to matter.
Yeah. All right, guys. So every single day this week, try to read chapter 2, verses 12 through 18, answer one of the questions, and we will talk to you next week.
All right, guys. Have an awesome week, and I look forward to being back together next week.
All
Bye,
right.
Matt.
Later.